Hello, everyone, and welcome to October's Beyond the Sea webinar. This is Nancy Patterson with the National Network of Libraries of Medicine, Southeastern Atlantic region. And I have a little bit of housekeeping to do before I introduce our speaker and our topic. First of all, everyone is muted upon entry unless you called in yourself, in which case please make sure your phone is muted. If you take a look at the chat box, you'll see that I put in the URL for closed captioning for those who need it. Also, a link for handouts that Dr. Lenstra kindly uploaded for us, as well as the link where you can get the recording of this webinar in about 1 week's time. At the end of the webinar, I will post a link for the MLA evaluation and CE that allows you to print your own certificate. This is worth 1 CE today. And Dr. Lenstra is happy to take questions as he goes, so feel free to put them in the chat box. If he happens to miss something, please just put it in or unmute yourself at the end when he takes questions. You can do that by just unmuting the icon next to your name on the WebEx screen, or you can do *6. So just if you do get looked over, sometimes the chat box gets a little crowded, so please just ask again at the end. All right, housekeeping done. Without further ado, welcome to October's Beyond the Sea webinar, How to Develop Healthy Living Programs Through Shared Use Partnerships. We're lucky to have a fantastic presenter today, Dr. Noah Lenstra, MLIS, who's the Assistant Professor of Library and Information Science at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, where he founded and directs the Let's Move in Libraries initiative. Hopefully you get all of his wonderful posts and newsletters. It's done a fantastic job with communication. He's the author of the forthcoming book, Healthy Living at the Library, which will be out in 2020 from Libraries Unlimited. And in July 2019, he received, with colleagues from Wayne State and University of Oklahoma, a 3-year grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services to study how small and rural public libraries address health and wellness through public programs. He's a member of the Public Library Association's Promoting Healthy Communities Advisory Group, and his research on these topics has been published in numerous scholarly articles and blogs. He blogs monthly on the topic for the American Library Association's Public Programs Office. Dr. Lenstra is also an affiliated faculty member in the UNCG Gerontology Department and has worked with the National Institute on Aging's Go for Life campaign for the past 2 years. Dr. Lenstra, I'll leave it to you. Thank you for presenting for us today.
Thank you. Thanks for that introduction and kind words. And so just to give a quick outline of what we'll go over today, we'll start by defining shared use. I'm probably assuming that most of you have probably not heard of this concept before, so this is a concept that comes from the field of public health. So I'll start by spending a little bit of time outlining what this concept actually entails before going into how shared use is applied in libraries, and then move into some nuts and bolts ways how you can use this concept and some of the tools that it includes to shape health programming at your library. And then at the end, we'll have plenty of time, hopefully, for a good interactive discussion to hopefully address any questions or concerns that people may have. And I'm always available for follow-ups as well. So if there's any question that comes to you later, you're always welcome to reach out to me with any follow-ups. So without any further ado, what is shared use? So this is, as I mentioned, a concept that comes from the field of public health. And so, oh, and I should also point out, if you want to access my slides, where you can actually click on the links and open up the cited material, the links are live. You can download them from my website to open up any of the articles that I'll be mentioning throughout the presentation. But shared use is really, I mean, it's not an extraordinarily complex idea, but it's really this idea that facilities such as churches, schools, any public space can be opened up to opportunities for people to live healthier lives. So think of having, as this photo shows, opening up the school gymnasium after hours to do a Zumba class, or using green space by a church to install a community garden. Just the basic concept of sharing public spaces to improve public health, as this article from the New York Times states. And just if this is kind of my #1 recommendation. If there's any one site that you want to go to really dig deep into this topic, and this Change Lab Solutions, this nonprofit, has an entire web page about shared use and how to do it, including how to deal with liability, and pretty much any question that you may have about the actual nuts and bolts implementation of this concept, you can find answers to at this website. And also, as I mentioned, this is becoming increasingly prevalent in the field of public health. So for instance, in the latest issue of The Nation's Health, the newsletter of the American Public Health Association, they talk about how to increase physical activity through community fitness. And one of the strategies that's being recommended in this new book published by the American Public Health Association is to get more involved in joint or shared use agreements between local governments, school districts, and faith-based organizations. And really the idea behind today's presentation is that libraries should be part of the conversation about shared use. And as we'll see in a little bit, we're actually already doing it, even if we may not even realize it ourselves. But just to kind of give an authoritative definition, shared use, also called joint use, community use, or open use, occurs when government entities or other organizations agree to open their facilities for use by the broader community. One common example is a school playground available for public use after school hours. However, shared use arrangements can allow new users for many types of spaces, including gymnasiums, pools, playing fields, parks, walking trails, garden plots, kitchens, and meeting and performance spaces, as well as pavilions. And it can take place on either an informal basis based on historical precedent, or on a formal basis based on a written legal document. And a written agreement can help address concerns about resources, maintenance, security, and liability. And a little bit later on, I'll talk about how you can use a memorandum of understanding agreement with your partners to make sure it's all written out and clear who's responsible for what when you do these types of arrangements. And just by way of definition, shared use is also one of the strategies that was heavily promoted by former First Lady Michelle Obama and her Let's Move campaign. And so it also is, as I developed Let's Move in libraries, I drew heavily on how former First Lady Obama advocated for, as it says in this resource guide, opening your facility. Provide open access to your organization's facilities, such as large open green spaces or other meeting spaces. Allow after-school programs, clubs, or groups to use these spaces to increase opportunities for physical activity after school or on weekends. Concerned about the complications of opening your facilities to the community? Develop an agreement to facilitate a partnership between your organization and other nonprofits, private or governmental organizations. And so, as I mentioned, this concept, although it may be new to the field of librarianship, has been extensively developed in the field of public health. So really it's just bringing public libraries more firmly into the domain of public health, and utilizing the tools that are already out there to increase access to healthy living opportunities. So what does all this have to do with libraries? Well, I think it has to do with libraries because libraries are, first and foremost, in my opinion, public spaces, even though I think we overlook that aspect of libraries all too often. But according to Wayne Wiegand, the foremost historian of America's public libraries, people love public libraries for 3 reasons: the transformative potential of reading, the useful nature of information, and the community building capacity of public space. And so when we were talking about shared use arrangements, we're really focused on this last element, the element of libraries, that is the fact that they are public spaces, spaces open to the public on a regular basis. So it makes them the perfect place to do shared use arrangements. And just another way to look at this comes from R. David Lankeys. You may have heard of him before. He's written about the Atlas of New Librarianship and the New Librarianship Field Guide. And one of the things that Lankeys really advocates for is considering libraries as platforms. And he wrote especially about this on the concept of STEM. But I think if we swap out STEM with HEAL, which refers to healthy eating, active living, we can see how shared use in the library makes sense based on kind of this new definition of public librarianship. So Lankeys says that America's public libraries can play an important role in furthering STEM education. However, this will be true only if STEM learning efforts focus on librarians and acting as facilitators. Any effort to transform librarians into STEM experts will have limited success, given the increasing number of roles libraries are being asked to take on. At the same time, the current belief among many librarians that they can only offer programming in which they feel comfortable or have expertise will strongly constrain STEM programming in libraries. Librarians must instead create platforms within a community to unleash STEM expertise. This will involve changing the concept of libraries in the mind of librarians and community members alike. Librarians must facilitate the use and sharing of STEM expertise already existent in the community by the community. So when I read this quote and when I read the work of Lankeys, I mean, what he's essentially advocating for is shared use. I mean, that's essentially what it is. If you replace STEM with HEAL, what he's saying is that you don't need to be an expert, you don't need to be a medical professional, but you can facilitate healthy living by using your spaces and being that facilitator of sharing of knowledge about healthy living practices. And so how can shared use, this concept, help shape health programming in libraries? And the answer is, it already is. So you don't need to look too far to see tons of examples of how this is already happening. And so I think the first thing we can do is just acknowledge that it's happening and study how it's happening. And so, for instance, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, if you go to their website, they made a video called Fun and Fitness in a Library Parking Lot, featuring the Monterey City Library in California. And so Norma, our Vizu, the city librarian, was approached by a group of dancers who were looking for a space to do regular community dance groups. And they thought the library parking lot would be the perfect space. It was kind of a natural gathering point because it was had a roof. It was protected from the sun, and so the librarian agreed to work with this dancing group to allow them to meet in the library parking lot. And so now citizens come in and do their regular dance class in the library parking lot. And asked by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation why she did this, Norma answered, "Later on, I realized that this would be a positive image for the library because these are residents. These are actual people who live here. Why were we not allowing them to use what their taxes pay for?" And so I really think if we want to do this, we can be more like Norma and really embrace this idea that libraries can facilitate access to healthy living by working with community members and community groups to create new opportunities for people to practice healthy living, whether it be in the form of physical activity or growing food or many of the other habits of that nature. It's also happening in places like Bellingham, Washington, where the library created a Skillshare. And if you want to learn more about this, OCLC Web Junction highlighted this particular library in its small spaces or smart spaces for small libraries work that you can download here. but essentially they created a space within the library where community residents are invited to share skills with other community members interested in learning about them. So here again, the librarian is not actually offering the programs. Instead, it's community members offering programs for other community members with the library as the platform for that to take place. And one of the popular programs is Tai Chi and Qigong, which you see in the middle of this picture. And according to the librarian, Skillshare has provided a great opportunity for us to connect people with other people and with other ways of learning. So if you're doing this correctly, if you're doing this well, it doesn't mean that you have more responsibilities added to your plate. Instead, you're finding ways to open up your space to allow the communities members that you serve to share practices amongst themselves. And it's also happening across New York City. So for instance, in a more formal shared use arrangement, New York City libraries have negotiated a joint use arrangement with the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation. So across the city, this arrangement enables libraries to host, at no cost to them, aerobics, yoga, Pilates, and Zumba, all taught by expert fitness instructors from Parks and Recreation. And this program has dramatically increased the number and availability of affordable, accessible, and fun fitness options for New Yorkers. And across the entire city, all of the Shape Up NYC classes has had over 500,000 visits since the program began in 2010. So this is happening. It's happening on a large scale, and I think it's time that we again first acknowledge that it's happening, and second really think hard about how we can support it. Another great example of shared use in action in the library is the USDA Summer Feeding Program. And I'm sure probably some of you have heard about this before, but essentially this is shared use in action. This is libraries typically serving as summer meal sites. So the food is prepared elsewhere by the sponsoring organization and delivered to the library. So the library has agreed in this program to open up its facility to be a venue for feeding food insecure youth during the summer months. And that's essentially what shared use is all about. And you can learn more in this article that I published with my colleague Chris Starpa earlier this year. And gardening is another great example of shared use in action. So closer to me here in Walkertown, North Carolina, this is a picture of in front of the library in Walkertown, North Carolina. Since 2012, they've had a number of raised beds that they put in with community members and volunteers. And so community members like Jessica in this picture check out a raised bed. And so you check out the raised bed and then you can use it to garden during the summer months. And so this is a picture of one of the Walkertown Library gardeners, Jessica, coming early in the morning to water her tomato plants. And so that's another great example. So if you have any space that's not being utilized fully, whether it be indoors or outdoors, shared use will allow you to best utilize that space to support public health. And also, basically the same thing is happening in Brooklyn, going back to New York City. So, and in Brooklyn, New York, the Williamsburg Library has partnered with this Human Impact Institute to create a library garden. So their goals are to beautify the library grounds, create community relationships, promote green space, mitigate air pollution, and prevent stormwater runoff. And as it says in the advertisement for this program, we provide supplies and training, you provide the help. So that's another, so again, it's all about that facilitation, being kind of the librarian. The librarian is kind of a community organizer where you're not actually running the entire program, you're kind of doing the facilitation so that the program can run itself. And they get that in Toledo, Ohio as well, where recently the Toledo Public Library created a program to install box gardens at every single branch of the Toledo-Lucas County Public Library. And the gardens are tended by volunteers, and the produce is free for the community to take. So again, using the space in a way that is creative and that improves population health. in small towns as well as big cities. So again, closer to me here in North Carolina, there's a community called West Jefferson, which is a small town of about 1,300 people in far northwest North Carolina in the Appalachian Mountains. And so about 10 years ago, one of the librarians in West Jefferson found out that there was a yoga club in the town that was meeting in the church basement. And she went over there and saw that the space was really not ideal for the class, and she said, why don't you just come do it at the library? Our space is better. And so that's what they did. And for the last 10 years, if you go to the library on Monday night, you can drop in and do some free yoga at 5:30. Have fun, make friends, get fit, feel balanced. If you've been wanting to give yoga a try in a low-key setting, this may be a great opportunity for you. And it's all about being creative and being flexible in terms of how you use your space and being open to opportunities such as this one. And a more food-related one from a small town, this time from Clive, Iowa. They introduced a few years ago a veggie exchange, and this is literally all that it is. They just put up a folding table in the library foyer, and people can drop off extra produce from their gardens and take what they want or need. And it's that simple. That's literally all that it is. And it's popping up all over the place. If you look up Little Food Pantry Public Libraries, you'll see a bunch of other examples just like this one. So it doesn't have to be anything that's complicated. It's not a complicated concept. I think it's just the more complicated thing is being willing to try it out and being willing to let go of control over how your space is utilized. And nothing should be off the table. So one of the things that I've been closely following is the number of libraries that have set up farmers markets. And the image on the left is from the Small Libraries Create Smart Spaces program from OCLC Web Junction, which I would highly recommend as an additional resource. Also focused on how small libraries in particular can be more creative and innovative in terms of how they use the small spaces that they have available. And so I was at the Association for Rural and Small Libraries a few weeks ago talking about food programming in libraries. And I asked the rural librarians in attendance, how many of you host farmers markets? And I was amazed that actually about a half dozen librarians from around the country said that they actually host farmers markets in their library parking lot. So there's really nothing that should be off the table. And it can be done in academic libraries as well. So these are two examples of academic libraries doing shared use. So in California and Los Angeles, the Cal State LA University Library has teamed up with University Wellness to offer free fitness and yoga classes throughout the semester in the library. And just another example from a community college of the library teaming up with intramurals and campus recreation to do a free fitness class on the library terrace. And I'm going to put a link here in the chat box. I just came across this actually in just very recently, but some of you maybe saw this article that came out on Inside Higher Ed earlier this week. The article is entitled Library as Student Success Hubs. And so essentially what it's showing is that, especially on community college campuses, it makes sense for the library to be the destination for students seeking mental health services, social work services. So we're seeing this more and more, not only in public libraries, but on college and academic libraries as well. And let me go on, and also in school libraries. So this is just an image of the school library at the Belleville West High School in the St. Louis metro area, where for the last few years, a math teacher whose passion is to increase interest in yoga among African American men like him has taught free yoga to teachers and students at the high school library after the school day. And through these free classes, he has increased access to yoga for individuals who otherwise would not consider it. And so just kind of giving a really brief overview of what shared use is and some examples of how it manifests itself in libraries, I wanted to say a little bit about how we can use this concept to shape health programming in our libraries. And so I think the first thing, again, is to acknowledge that it's already happening. So this is not some wild idea coming out of left field. Even though we don't typically talk about it as such, it's actually an established best practice in libraries across the country. So start there. The second is to embrace public health in libraries. So libraries and public libraries in particular are not only spaces for consumer health, they're not only spaces that promote health literacy, they're also spaces that promote public health and population health by increasing access to things like yoga, Zumba, gardening, food, and many of the other things for which shared use is used. The third thing that we can do is embrace the public and shift from asking what do you need to what can we do together. So being open to working with the yoga clubs or the dance groups, the many groups and entities and individuals in our community who are passionate about increasing access to things like gardening and physical activity, and working with those individuals and groups to bring programming into our libraries. The fourth thing we can do is look to other sectors. As I mentioned, this concept has been well established in sectors like faith-based institutions, schools, parks, etc. So we can do a lot and we can learn a lot by seeing how this has worked in other settings. And as I mentioned, if there's one resource if you only go to one resource after today's presentation, I would advocate for this resource. I have the URL at the bottom of this slide, but I just put it in the chat as well. So this ChangeLab Solutions kind of toolkit on developing shared use partnerships is probably the one place I would go if I was looking to get started with this. And then finally, I'm an academic. I'm a faculty member here at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, and so this is something that I've been actively researching. And I'd also love your support and help, especially if you're in an academic context. So help me figure out how this is already happening in libraries. So join me in figuring out how shared use is playing out in libraries, and then based on that, help me and help work with others to develop more continuing education around this topic, because I think there's so much more that we could do to support the development of this trend. And just a few kind of more logistical nuts and bolts things. So as I mentioned, doing things like developing a memorandum of an understanding with your partners, I think would be absolutely essential. So when you're working with partners, your staff may change, the partner's staff may change, lots of things can change, and so the more that you're able to actually put the partnership into paper and actually formalize that joint use or shared use arrangement, the more likely that that arrangement is going to endure across time. And so this is just an example from Columbia, South Carolina, where the Richland Library has hosted farmers markets at multiple branches for many years. And so as a result of this farmers market programming becoming so well established, they have formalized it into using a memorandum of understanding that lays out the responsibilities of the different partners. And you can get some examples in the link that I shared, this ChangeLab Solutions. They have some examples of example kind of memorandums of understanding that you could use in your library. And the other major concern that I always hear talked about whenever you talk about food or physical activity is liability. And so check yourself before you wreck yourself. There's tons of examples out there of different waivers of liability and release forms that libraries are using to protect themselves against the perception of legal liability in case someone injures themselves or eats something that may make them sick or unwell or in any way. And so this is just an example of the liability form that has been used for a chair-based exercise class held at the Rural Hall Public Library in North Carolina, which is a joint use, a shared use program between the library and the health department that has been offered at the library for the last 13 years. And so it's worked well for them for 13 years. And why reinvent the wheel? You can download this form and many other forms that I've collected at my website. So it doesn't have to be anything overly complicated, but if you are concerned about liability, it's easy enough to just get people to sign these release forms. And yeah, don't make it more complicated than it needs to be. But I think really the main thing is just to speak up and let people know that the library is open for shared use. I don't think enough people realize that the library can do this, and certainly not even us in libraries realize that we can do this, despite the fact that it's happening all around us. So let people know that the library is up for this. Let people know that if they're looking for a venue to do their yoga club or put in a garden, that the library would be a good partner to work with them. And so this is just a quote from the former director of the Crandon Public Library in northern Wisconsin, based on her experience working with the Public Health Department for a number of years for a variety of different programs. Michelle Goldberg said, "The library is now seen as a community partner. It has allowed us to be part of the conversation and therefore part of the solution. So get in the game and stay in the game is probably the best advice I would give. There's lots of logistical things to be worked out, but really what I'm advocating for is a shift in the conversation from programs to partnerships. I think shared use is really all about partnerships." And so now I rushed through things pretty quickly just because I wanted to make sure we have tons of time for Q&A. So I have given you a ton of information, and I'm happy to go back to anything that I may have brushed over quickly, but I now want to hear from you and hopefully start a conversation about how we can more deliberately support shared use programming in our libraries, whether they be public libraries, academic libraries, school libraries, or even a special library like a medical library. So the first question, based on what we've talked about today, do you feel like you practice shared use at your library in any way? So many ideas and so little time. Yeah, so Arlene, so I would encourage you to think about the return on investment that comes from partnerships. And so it's not about, again, it's not about you as a librarian have to doing all these things. It's more about kind of letting people know that you're open to doing some of these things, and your partners would be the ones who would actually run the programs. But do any of you actually do shared use at your library? Okay, so Arlene, you have 2 yoga classes. Great, great. And who do you work with to do those programs, Arlene? And anyone else? Does anyone else practice shared use at your library? And so an outside person does the children's. Partnered with Volunteers of America to do HIV testing. Yeah, Sarah, thank you. That's a great example. So Sarah said that they worked with Volunteers of America. They came in and did HIV testing. So that's a perfect example of the shared use programming in action. Okay, so Arlene actually does the yoga classes herself since she's a certified yoga instructor. Yeah, there's great stuff coming in on the chat. Keep it coming. So Julie says, we practice it to an extent. Some branches have gardens, others host exercise classes, but they're primarily either run by staff who have a certification, or we contract with individuals. More traditionally programming than what I'd consider partnerships. Yeah, so yeah, I think if you're paying someone to lead the program, that would be a more traditional program. And really, when we talk about shared use, it's a true kind of community partnership where there's no exchange of money between the library and who's ever doing the program. So Julie kind of says that they also host Narcan training done by the county's health department. So yeah, absolutely, that's shared use. Arlene said one of the larger branches is trying to do a garden but hasn't gotten community involved. Yeah, I would definitely suggest considering getting the community involved, because I know a garden is definitely a large undertaking. And so I think the more that you can get your community involved in the garden, and I'm actually going to share, Arlene, a resource that I would recommend for any library that's considering putting in a garden in their green space. So earlier this year, I worked with the librarian and the Person County Library in Roxborough, North Carolina. So we did a session on librarians venturing outside lifelong learning through gardens and EcoExplore. And so if you click on this link, the presentation handout, the librarian that I worked with, she actually created a kind of how-to guide for how to start a community garden or how to start a food garden at your library by drawing upon community partnerships. And so she worked with an incredible array of different organizations, everyone from the cooperative extension system to different like Lowe's, hardware stores, and so I think a garden is really a great way to kind of get your whole community involved in kind of improving the public space. So Lori says that they've allowed local hospitals to do heart health programs and a pre-diabetes program. Also allowed a mobile health clinic to use our outdoor spaces. So great, yeah. So that's wonderful, Lori, that you've had such good partnerships with hospitals that have come in and done programs. And so if you haven't done shared use programming is there anything that's holding you back? Is there anything that prevents you from doing the types of programs that I've talked about today? Yeah, Julie, I absolutely would advocate wholeheartedly for university extension programs. I mean, the extension is really, in my opinion, probably one of the best health partners in the country. I think sometimes people don't think of the extension system as being a health organization, but they absolutely are. And many extension agents are actually trained nutrition educators. So one of my blogs is all about working with extension systems and extension agents in both rural areas as well as in urban communities to bring in especially programs on gardening, nutrition. Yeah, the extension is a great partner for anything related to food. Okay, so yeah, and that's Debbie. Debbie has a concern that I've heard many times, getting the idea through legal due to liability issues. And I hear that a lot. And one thing that I've worked with some librarians that have really struggled a lot to get ideas approved because of this perception of legal liability. And one of the great things about using a concept that's so well established in the field of public health is that there's a lot of language that's already been developed for people that want to do shared use but are getting pushed back from risk managers. So the schools and other government entities that are already doing shared use have really developed some great resources for how do you talk with your risk manager to convince them that not only is this something that is being done across the country, but we could very easily do. But I think it does require a certain amount of being comfortable with this idea yourself. So if you and your staff are not comfortable with that, it's unlikely that you're going to convince your county manager or your risk manager that this is a good thing for the library to be doing. But I've seen people that have actually been able to do it. So I mentioned, I'll go back a little bit. So I mentioned this Walkertown library in North Carolina. The librarian there was she wanted to do yoga and Tai Chi classes, and she was getting an enormous amount of pushback from the county's risk manager because he or she just felt this would inevitably open up the county to be sued and all these lawsuits. And she just kept pushing it. She just said, you know, this is happening in libraries across the country. Here we have a waiver of liability. And eventually she was able to get it started. And guess what? The library has not gotten sued. And my guess is it's never going to get sued. So I think a lot of it is just being able to sit down with people who have those concerns and explain to them, this is happening. I mean, it's not like we're the first people to come up with this idea. This is happening all across the country, and it seems to be working well. So let's give it a shot. And Julie says that they've worked with the extension to do canning, health insurance, green cleaning, gardening. Yeah, all kinds of different things with the extension. They'll also do pickling classes often. Yeah, so Lauren, for Lauren says the example of redundancy. So here again, I would really point to the example of New York City. So I mean, New York City is a pretty dense urban area, but what they really found in New York City is, despite the fact that there's so many spaces kind of in close proximity to one another, you really can't have enough opportunities for people to engage in healthy living. And so I mean, the New York City has an immense number of parks and recreation facilities, but they still found that even with that dense network of parks and recreation facilities, it wasn't actually enough. Not everyone is going to go to a conventional rec center. Not everyone is going to go to a park. And so I hear you about kind of this perception of redundancy, but I also think that looking at places like New York City, or I'm thinking also of Nashville, Tennessee, which has really embraced this as well. I think there's definitely a large opportunity for public libraries in urban areas to also increase access to healthy living. And I'll just give a quick example. So I was recently talking about this with a colleague, and my colleague mentioned that she's the caregiver for her 90-year-old mother, and so she told me the 90-year-old mother opened the paper one day and was just reading the paper and said, "Huh, the public library offers a chair yoga class. I guess I'll go down and check it out." And she did. This 90-year-old woman got in her car and drove down to the library to do chair yoga. And so I think libraries are special spaces. They're going to engage people in ways that other spaces do not. And I think getting that message out, getting out the message that the library is going to increase access, even if the same thing is being offered at a facility next door, a library is going to be seem more approachable to people, and it's going to increase access to healthy living. Let's see. So Marianne says that they work the public library's annual seed swap run by, yeah, so seed swaps, I've seen those. It can be competitive, and I think shared use, the idea is to shift from this competitive mindset to more of a cooperative mindset, and I've seen this really work well. I keep coming back to the Shape Up NYC, but I think this is a perfect example of shifting from the idea that you have to compete for people to instead let's work together to improve public health, and that can be difficult too if you're working with partners that are in this competitive mindset. But I think we can be the models for what we want our communities to be like, and I think in the best case scenario we want to be cooperating and not competing. But I think there's, in both urban areas and small towns, there's a niche for libraries to fill. So Nancy says that, from Barbara. Barbara says that they have a retired botanist who has done tree ID walks around the neighborhood. Yeah, that sounds like an amazing program, and I love how that program, that tree identification walk, it combines physical activity, but it also is such a great learning opportunity for people to learn more about the environment and ecology. And another great walking program that I've seen lots of libraries do is to do walking programs that are based on local history or art history, so a kind of librarian-led walking tour of historic sites, or kind of, and I'll just make a quick plug. The next webinar that I'm going to be doing is actually going to be with the American Library Association's Public Programs Office. So I'm working with librarians in Illinois and North Carolina to do a program called Taking a Walk with the Library, Story Walk, Walking Book Clubs, and more. And so if you're interested in anything having to do with walking, join me at that opportunity. We'll be talking in particular about how your library can get involved in promoting walking. And Elizabeth says it can be difficult to have partners keep up with ongoing programs. However, we are unable to afford to pay instructors on an ongoing basis. We fall back on doing what staff can handle, or doing the occasional outside presenter for a shorter program run, which leaves patrons wanting more. Sometimes we can't fulfill. And I think that is definitely a real problem. And there's no, I don't have a silver bullet solution to that problem that Elizabeth is raising. But I do think as much as possible, as much as you can formalize the arrangement into something like a memorandum of understanding or even a simple joint use agreement, and you can get some examples of joint use agreements in this shared use playbook, which I mentioned, has been put out by Change Lab Solutions. The more you can kind of get those agreements written down, the greater likelihood that they'll persist. And like I said, I've definitely seen places that have been doing kind of ongoing programming for over a decade, whether it be with the local yoga club or with the health department. So I definitely do know places where these arrangements have kind of stood up for the test of time. And actually, I'll just share really quickly one of the most long-lasting partnerships that I know of. There's a public library in Texas. Where they've hosted a dancing group at the library. So it's a square dancing group that meets at this library in Texas, and they've been meeting there since 1972. So that was not 1972. This square dancing group has been meeting at the library. So there's definitely places where things go on for a long time. And I think, again, it's about shifting the conversation from programs to partnerships. So I think oftentimes in the programming space, we think so much about individual programs, and I think instead we have to think about partnerships and how do we form and sustain and grow partnerships, because really that's what shared use is all about. If we haven't kind of mastered partnerships, we haven't really haven't set ourselves up for success in this domain. And that kind of brings me to the last question that I wanted to end with today, which is, what type of continuing education would you like to see be made available around this topic? And what are some next steps you think of that could help us better prepare librarians to embrace shared use as a vital strategy for health promotion in libraries? So now, as we get to the last 15 minutes, I'd like to get your thoughts, get some feedback about how we can really develop this topic and make shared use kind of an integral dimension of our kind of playbook for promoting health through libraries. So any thoughts? And I believe, I'm not entirely sure, but I believe that you actually do have the ability to turn on your microphones. If you'd like to use audio, if that would be easier to kind of get your thoughts out.
Dr. Lenstra, this is Nancy.
Hi, Nancy.
I love the idea of librarians getting professional development support from their places of employment for the things that they're passionate about and want to teach, like, say, yoga or those sorts of things, or even a walking club or how to do it. And I think for webinars, a lot of people do have that kind of support. We've got a nice crowd here today. But for a physical class like that, or some kind of exercise form that they could teach if they wanted to, I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, so kind of a template that if a librarian wanted to do this on their own, kind of to try it out, so that's a good idea to have kind of a template. And Wayne asks about information on mental health programs, and I definitely agree that that would be a great thing. And I'll just share really quickly, I didn't talk too much about mental health programs. One of the mental health programs that I've been following the most is memory cafes. So I don't know if any of you ever heard of a memory cafe program, but these are typically done between public libraries and councils on aging or area agencies on aging. And so I think there's lots of opportunities to do kind of something like a memory cafe in partnership with an organization like that. And I really like what Sarah says about things really opening up when she started attending the local health coalition. Other agencies wanted to partner for programs, and thank you for sharing that, Sarah. I've heard similar sentiments from so many librarians as I've been doing my research over the years. So often, the best way to get started is to just show up to, if you have a local health coalition, or if your public health department has kind of meetings or community conversations, or even just starting those conversations yourself. So I'll share one example from Athens County, Ohio. In Athens County, Ohio, the library wanted to help promote bicycling. And so there was the county was putting a lot of greenways throughout Athens County, and they thought that there needed to be better support of bicycling in the community. So the library facilitated a number of community conversations about how the community can come together to support bicycling. So they brought in nurses, they brought in people from the health department, people from police, and out of those conversations, they ended up actually checking out bicycles from the library. But I think those conversations are really just so important. And so I think getting involved with things like local health coalitions, or even seeing if you can get involved in your health department's strategic planning process, any way that you can kind of get yourself in the network of institutions that are focused on these topics, whether it be mental health or active living or health and nutrition. Oh, yeah, and Danielle, that's a great idea from Stillwater, Oklahoma, putting up a thank you to sponsors, listing each sponsor on a single page on a bulletin board. And yeah, I think definitely saying a big thank you to everyone who helps out, making sure that everyone who is contributing to make a shared use program reality at your library feels like they're getting credit and are appreciated for all the work that they put in to make these programs possible. So that's a great idea, Danielle. Okay, I think we've kind of come to an end. Oh, I have this question slide up here, but I wanted to make sure there's going to be this Medical Library Association evaluation and link to get your continuing education. And I also just want to emphasize that this is a topic, probably one of my favorite topics to talk about and think about. And so if there's ever anything I can do to help you in any way, please do reach out to me. This is my email address, and you can follow me on Twitter at Noah Lenstra. And yeah, please do reach out with any questions or thoughts that you may have. And I guess I'll just close to see if there's any last questions or thoughts that people have that have not come up already.
This is Nancy. While people are thinking of last questions, I want to thank you, Dr. Lenstra. You're just an absolute fountain of information, and I know you've energized some people today and will be accessible to them as well. I hope everyone who's attending will subscribe to the blog and pay attention to all the information that Dr. Lenstra shares. He knows his stuff. In the box, I have also put the MLACE link there in case that's easier too, and the webinar recording link. We also have our next webinar coming up the same week as Dr. Lenstra, so we're packing the week for you. Ours will be on Friday, November 15th from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And it's on consumer health information justice, identifying and addressing information-related factors that contribute to health disparities. The presenter will be Dr. Beth St. John, MLIS. She is from the University of Maryland College Park and the Horowitz Center for Health Literacy. So we have lots of information to share and wonderful experts to help you do what you want to do. You're getting a lot of thank yous in the box, Dr. Lenstra. We all appreciate your time, appreciate all of you joining us, and hope to see you in November. Hope your week is good to you.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and thanks Nancy for the very kind words. All right. Hope you all have a great day.
Thank you, Dr. Lenstra. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.